that going. And so we have our meeting minutes from the last meeting, and hopefully everybody received copies of this packet that I emailed out. And we will hold off on taking a vote to approve the minutes because we don't really have a quorum to do so. So let's just move on from there. And next item of business is our treasurer's report. So Janet, our treasurer, is not with us, but in your packet is her report that says that we have $1,357.92 in our treasury. We typically charge people $20 a year to become members, and we've had some donations in the past as well. We really haven't spent much money this past year, so a lot of that is just kind of carried over. So that's what we have in our treasury. And let's talk about number 3 on the agenda. I got one person here looking to be admitted, so let me let them in. We have number 3 on our agenda, which is our Niagara County lawsuit. And that we did actually with the University of Buffalo Civil Liberties Clinic. Mike Higgins, who's an attorney at the UB Law School Clinic, was our attorney. We sued Niagara County over a freedom of information request we made, which was denied. And our lawsuit was successful, which is great. Supreme Court judge agreed with us that what Niagara County was doing was a violation of the Freedom of Information Law. What we asked for was the annual financial disclosure forms filed by Niagara County legislators, which I've gotten from other communities without any issue, but Niagara County refused to provide them, and actually had a local law, which was very unusual, saying their disclosure forms are secret and confidential. Only the only the Niagara County District Attorney, Sheriff, and their ethics board could receive them. So very unusual, but the court ruled in our favor. So I have the disclosure forms. I've sent them out to news media. I just started taking a look at them myself. And what I'd like to do is maybe put together a report before the next forms come out. If possible, they come out typically or due in May. And what I noticed just by looking at the forms is most of them are handwritten and some of them are kind of difficult to read. It would be great if they could create some sort of form where people can electronically type in the information and file them electronically, which may make it easier to get copies in the future. But some of the handwriting's kind of difficult to read. I noticed that not all the questions are being answered. Like it asks on there, list your residence. And people seem to leave that blank. I assume most legislators have a residence, whether it's owned or rented. So I've noticed some little things like that. Now that we have the reports, it'll be interesting to see if there's anything worthwhile. I mean, I noticed some things like I didn't know where some of these people were employed. Things like that were interesting to find out. Some of them had served on boards. I know one particular legislator serves on a bunch of boards. I noticed when I went to like his LinkedIn page, but none of that was listed on his disclosure form. So things like that. So we'll continue to work on that. And yes.
Does it make sense for each of us to take, a person and comb through the forms, or are we going to count on the press to do that?
No, that would be good if maybe we could dole them out to our volunteer board members and take a look. Even just taking the form, and like I did, I just typed in one legislator's name and went to his LinkedIn page and said, geez, none of this stuff is listed on his form. Even just that kind of stuff would be helpful, maybe to just do a simple Google search of people and see does other stuff come up, or make a note of, what questions just there's no response for. some of them, one legislator in particular did a great job. I mean, he actually typed up all his financial investments and debts. Others were, again, just very quick about it. I mean, this guy listed his mortgage, his car payment. I mean, which is what you're supposed to do, disclose your information, whereas others just didn't. So yeah, I'll send an email out and maybe we can all, take a few names and see what we can come up with. Anything else on the Niagara County lawsuit? So next item on the agenda, number 4, is our school board executive sessions report. We just released that yesterday. We did a press conference. We took a look at 20 school districts across the state. And for a 6-month period, we just looked at their meeting minutes. And this report is probably our most time-consuming report. We copy all the executive session minutes, and are they doing them correctly? What we know from past reports is a lot of boards will do things like executive session to discuss personnel, and that's not sufficient. You got to say more than that. Or executive session to discuss litigation, not sufficient. You need to specify, at least tell me the name of the lawsuit. Or executive session to discuss collective bargaining. Tell us the name of the union or the contract that you're behind closed doors to discuss. Maria, you're making a lot of noise there. Can you mute yourself?
Sorry, I will.
So we did this report and 70% of school districts failed. I think the average score sadly was like 35 out of 100. So 70% failed. 12 out of the 20 that we looked to review, one didn't post meeting minutes at all, the Utica School Board. 2 had incomplete minutes, so Niagara Falls and New York City. So I kind of took them out of the mix and went with the 17. So out of the 17, 12 received a failing grade, 5 a passing grade. It was just like Schenectady got, and 30% of them got not a single motion correct. So like Schenectady got all 11 wrong. Their minutes say a motion to go in executive session, nothing else. Now, it was interesting, the Daily Gazette, which is in Schenectady, contacted them and they said, well, if you watch our videos, you'll see we make a motion, but that we've done a poor job in our minutes. Well, the minutes should accurately reflect the motions that are being made. So apparently they do make a bit of a more general motion, but even the reporter said even their general motion wouldn't receive a passing grade because they're just not doing it correctly. But so the whole idea, hopefully we can educate people. There's just a lot of bad practices. And what a lot of them have said, and I'll send out links to the news articles, well, we follow the advice of our attorneys. And a lot of attorneys are just getting it wrong. So, and a lot of it's just bad practices. This is the way we've always done it. And
I've been on both ends of that. I was on the school board.
Mr. Godlewski, you were a town board member, weren't you?
A town board, school board member, and I can honestly say on the school board, the problem was that you had 7 members, and you'd get in there, and I would always bring it up. We're not supposed to be in here talking about this. Well, we took a vote, we can talk about it. And on the town board, you want to laugh. Of course, we all know how politics get involved in town board discussions. I won't tell you the number of times I had it thrown back in my face. You don't have an ESQ after your name. And I would retort, your job is to give us your legal opinion, not to tell us what to do. And of course, I won many a battle, but believe me, I read both articles in the Times Union today and the Gazette, and I could have added quite a bit more postscripts to those articles. And you're right, everything is right in there. And it's sad because my experience has been over 25 years that they go in there because they got something to hide. They don't want the public to know about it. And that's unfortunate because when you don't have open government, we all know what happens. But anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, and we kind of made that point, although you have the right to go into an executive session, you don't have to. You can certainly, most times when they're talking about litigation, you're just getting an update. You can do that in public. We got a court date scheduled, the answers have been submitted. You're only supposed to go in executive session to discuss litigation if you're discussing strategy. And quite honestly, board members shouldn't be that involved with strategy. That should be up to the attorneys. Hopefully we can educate people. Every single board member for every board that we reviewed, the report was emailed to them. Hopefully their attorneys will take a look at it, and we attached opinions from the New York State Committee on Open Government that gave examples of the correct way to do these things. This is not the first time we've had terrible results for executive sessions. It just seems to be a continuing problem.
Quick question. Did you have any that had issues with when they were going into executive session? Back when I was a reporter in Westchester many years ago, I'd have some boards that would go into executive session prior to the open meeting, which is also not allowed. So that's just something to flag.
Right. I haven't seen that. Most tend to do it at the end of the meeting, but
Yep.
The town of Rotterdam's notorious for that. They don't go into, they have an agenda meeting, and then they go into executive session, and then they come out to the regular meeting.
Right.
Believe me, I
This
put
is
in
Richard.
5 years there.
Hold on, Richard. Yeah. All right, Richard, go ahead.
I was just going to add, the Lockport School Board generally does the same thing. They start the meeting usually with a long executive session, and then they come back out and do most of the public meeting.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say in this virtual world, that happens more than it even happened prior. It just
Probably.
allows for that kind of abuse.
Right. And what we've done in the past is we actually documented how long the executive sessions were, because sometimes the minutes will document when it started and when it ended. And it was amazing that some places spent more time in private than they did in public. Now for this report, I was going to do that, but a lot of places they don't document the time. And so I kind of steered away from that. But I did a report one time on the Tonawanda Town Board, and throughout the year, they actually met more in private than they did in public. It was pretty amazing.
Paul,
Yeah.
I think
You're from Tonawanda.
yes, I am. I think Tonawanda used to have longer executive sessions, and not only did they have sessions, but I believe, if I have this correct, they already voted on whatever it was that was coming up. So now they seem to have stopped it. I think they still have executive sessions, but they go through the pretense of at least having the vote, which is always unanimous,
Right.
whatever the issue is. So I think, I don't know, how long ago did you talk to them about
That was a couple years ago. I think it's gotten worse now that they're all one party board. So worse
So
than that.
anyway, it's
Now
just
they,
interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting that when they have executive sessions, and then when you ask a question, it's like, oh, that's executive session. It's like real secret. So I think I just think it's a real important issue. Thank you.
And a whole nother topic is political caucus meetings, where you'll have all the party members meet in private, which, is a terrible thing that the law allows. And you're not supposed to talk about public business, but who knows what they talk about when they're behind closed doors. And that's something we might want to take a look at in the future as well. But let's move on to number 5 on our agenda. That's Niagara Falls police reports. I also attached some articles for that. So Mayor Restaino became the mayor of Niagara Falls about a year ago. And my understanding, I read an article in the Niagara Reporter and the Niagara Gazette of newspapers complaining that the mayor was instituting a new policy. Before, they would send out a daily email, the police department, of arrest incidents, and the reporters would use that information to bring information to the public. And the mayor put a stop to that, saying that he was concerned about victim rights, and that if you wanted the information, you'd have to file a FOIL request. So we became aware of that. We sent a letter to the mayor. It got a lot of publicity, certainly in the Niagara County newspapers. I give the mayor credit. To his credit, we asked him to, consider making a change and take into account our concerns, the news media's concerns, and he did. And he changed his policy. And now what's happening is the daily email still goes out, but they're blacking out or redacting the names of victims or witnesses. Before, that information was provided, and there was kind of an understanding that reporters would not disclose that information. Now, according to the mayor, there was one incident where a newspaper kind of printed a report verbatim that disclosed the victim's name, and that's what he was concerned about, although people told me, but that happened before he became mayor. But I think we fixed it. To his credit, I think this change works for everybody. The reporters don't have to file a FOIL request. They're getting a daily email still, which allows them to write their articles, and victim names and information is being protected.
Paul, let me just jump in for a second to say that we actually had a conversation on this very subject on another jurisdiction in New York today, figuring out what's the best way to get at this. That is to say, police blotter, requiring a FOIL request for police blotters. So having the history of what you did will actually be interesting for us, which sort of leads me to another question. Excuse me for my lack of knowledge, but when you have a success like that, does this group make an effort to duplicate it in other parts of the state? What works in Niagara Falls will work in somewhere else.
We try to. If we see, now we're starting to get some experience behind our belts, we can say to people, look, this is how they do it in, Rochester or whatever. And actually what I did was, which was helpful, is I sent an email out. I have a pretty good reporter email list. So I sent an email out to my list and I said, hey, look, we have this problem going on in Niagara Falls. I'm curious, how do you do it in your community? And I got back 20 responses, which I can share with you. And people said, for the most part, they do now what Niagara Falls is doing. We still get a daily email, but they never gave us the victim's information. A few places have said, well, they'll give us the bare minimum and anything else we have to file a FOIL request for. But it was kind of interesting to see responses from all across the state.
I have a question, Paul.
Sure.
So there's a daily email that goes to the media about crimes and victims and stuff like that, like on a regular basis?
Yep.
Is that something a regular person could look at, or do we have to FOIL that to get that?
You would have to FOIL it.
So it's just like a running little ticker tape, so that if there's two murders or whatever. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
And before email was widespread, back in the olden days, you used to have to go to the police departments, which is what I did. And one of the ones that I went to would just let me use their copier for free and copy the reports. So.
And that's what a couple reporters actually said to me in my email response. Some of these small towns, that's still how they do it. They said, oh, every Monday I walk into the police station and they hand it to me and I review it. And
it's a better practice in some ways, I think, because then you actually interact with the officers, and sometimes you can talk to the chief while you're there and get information for other stories or questions answered. So.
Sure. And another part of this Niagara Falls thing was the mayor also saying that police officials were not available to talk to the press, without first clearing it through his new information officer. And I have heard of that happening in Buffalo and other places. But then I think over time, it kind of goes back to the way it was. But the mayor, I don't know if that's changed, but he's basically told the police department, you know, I don't want you talking to reporters without first clearing it through my information officer.
The Bs have the police blotters in it. If you
Yeah.
pick up like a Ken Tom B, Clarence B, exactly what Heather was saying. I had belonged to Neighborhood Watch. That's how we went and got the information to bring it back to Neighborhood Watch. We had to go to the police department and pull the records.
Yeah. So I think we helped make a difference on that to get the mayor to change what he was trying to do. Some people said, I don't think he was concerned about victim rights. What I think he was concerned about is that crime was a real problem in Niagara Falls and he just doesn't like all the negative press. I don't know. I'll take him for his word that victims is what he was concerned about, but either way, the thing I think is now resolved in a good way.
Paul, this might be something where we could do maybe a joint letter with you, since you've already written a letter on this topic or something like that on behalf of, there's a newspaper in Long Island that has this same exact issue.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so we might do something like that as opposed to reinventing the wheel when you've already dealt with the same exact issue.
Sure.
If interested, so.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So let's talk Niagara County. Although we're statewide, Niagara County seems to take up a lot of our time. Niagara County, I don't know, it's not that big of a county, but there's a lot going on there. So next item is number 6, Niagara Falls Water Board. And this was kind of a little bit out of our realm, although we've ventured into this on occasion. You know, we're focused on open government, not necessarily getting involved in contracting issues, but I saw an article in the Buffalo News that the Niagara Falls Water Board had a meeting and they hired a firm to do a search for a new executive director. And the articles, and one of the board members was complaining in the article that, geez, we haven't solicited other companies. I think we're required to solicit other companies. Why are we hiring this company? And the response was, well, this was recommended by one of the board members. And I thought, boy, this is a weird way to do business. I mean, you're not supposed to just as a board member kind of say, hey, I think you should hire this guy. So I went to the Niagara Falls website, Water Board website, read their procurement policy. And they, like most places, say, look, if it's over $10,000, and this contract would have been $24,000, certain things you are required to bid. Professional services, this is considered a professional service. You don't have to bid it, but you should do a request for proposals to solicit other companies. You know, they should respond to what it is you're looking for. And professional services, you don't have to pick based on price alone, but you should at least consider others. And I said, well, they didn't do any of that. And the other interesting thing is they posted a meeting notice Friday afternoon for a Monday special meeting. And whenever I see that, I'm always, you know, something's going on here. You don't, you know, put out a notice Friday afternoon for a Monday meeting. So we sent a letter on that as well. And I got a response back from the water board saying, well, yeah, we didn't send it out for proposals, but there are exceptions. And the exception in this is we need an executive director as soon as possible. But I don't think that's a valid exception. This is not the first time they've had a vacancy in the director position. They've named an acting director. This is not an emergency, but that's the response I received. You know, you could file a lawsuit over it, but I don't know if it's worth filing a lawsuit over, quite honestly. I tried to do some research on it, and the courts have, in some opinions, have said, you know, what constitutes an emergency really is a board's call. So I don't know. And if you were to, rebid, part of the argument is all these search firms kind of charge the same anyways. They all charge 20%, which may be true, but still everyone should have an opportunity to get the business.
So I have another question, Paul. So
Sure.
if they circumvent this rule, whether by indicating it's an emergency or not, and they hire somebody and it's over $10,000, can a regular little person just say, hey, that's not fair? Or no, they're not gonna unhire this person, right?
Yeah, the only way you do it would be to file a lawsuit to try to stop them from going forward with this contract. And I don't know if it's worth the effort, quite honestly, but
Okay,
at least we
So-
wanted to bring it to the public's attention that they didn't follow their rules, I don't believe, appropriately. And the water board is under heat for a lot of things, so maybe something will come of it, I don't know.
okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else on that? Otherwise, we'll go to number 7, Sunshine Week. Every year, people may or may not know, across the country, in middle of March, newspapers and journalists celebrate the importance of open government and freedom of the press. Every year, we try to do something during that week to highlight that. Legislator Amy Paulin in the New York State Assembly is a phenomenal legislator. I've been kind of stalking her for 3 or 4 years. I've sent her emails in the past and I never got a response. But she in the past has introduced legislation to amend the open meetings law. She's done other open government bills, and she passes like hundreds of bills. Some legislators pass 2 or 3 their whole career. She passes hundreds. I mean, she's one of the most prolific legislators in the assembly as far as getting bills passed. So I reached out to her a couple months ago with a bunch of open meeting amendment ideas. And I don't know if I caught her on a good day or what, but she responded, I really like these ideas. So she and I have been communicating, and it's listed on the agenda here, she's introduced a couple bills. The open meetings law in New York, as we've talked about, is very weak compared to some other states. I mean, it's shocking. Some of the people are surprised to learn some of the things the law does not mandate. So she's introduced these bills, and I talked to her about maybe during Sunshine Week, we could do a press conference with her, a Zoom press conference, to draw attention to these bills. And she's agreed to do that. So I believe we've locked in Monday, March 15th at 10 a.m. To do a press conference. So I'll be sending out more information on that. And so hopefully it'll be a way to draw attention to these bills. I think she has some others she's planning on introducing. And maybe we can actually change the law. So it's amazing to me that the law does not mandate that you have a right to be heard at your meeting. Now, most places will allow you to speak, but not all. The law doesn't mandate it. It doesn't mandate that you have to post meeting documents. It says as best as you can, you should. It doesn't mandate that you have to post meeting minutes. They have to be made available within 2 weeks, but they don't have to be posted. And then in this electronic world, I don't think it'd be that burdensome to require these things. And she agrees. So hopefully we can make that happen. Anybody have any comments on that?
Paul?
Yeah.
Is there going to be any talk, or is this coming at a later time, in terms of making the town clerks and the city clerks more accountable to doing? Is that going to be part of it? Because when there's no penalty or no penalty to the municipality, what is the incentive going to be for them to comply?
Well, that's a good question. And one of the biggest problems is there's very little enforcement ability of our open meeting laws. Other states, you can file a complaint with the Attorney General and they will pursue it. In New York, they leave it up to citizens to sue. So I think that's probably a more longer term project. First, I'd like to make these changes in the law and then focus on trying to toughen up the enforcement aspect of it. But
It's not the town clerk that's the problem. It's been my experience in most municipalities, the supervisor's office and the town attorney controls and makes up all the resolutions. And until they give, quote, the final resolution, or I can say in the town of Rotterdam, they used to go directly to the town clerk and she would certify them within 5 days. They stopped doing that about a year ago. So the town clerk is waiting for them before she can certify resolutions and even post them. So, like I said, you got to be careful blaming the town clerk because that's the administrative side of the house in most of your town governments is the supervisor's office. That is where the problem lies.
Yeah, I guess I'm just used to the way things are in Niagara County, where the town clerk or the city clerk is usually right in the back pocket of the town attorney. The whole administration. I mean, we were dealing with a lot of one-party governments over here. But yeah,
I am too,
I
believe me.
definitely hear you. That's how it should be.
it is the clerk that's responsible for doing the meeting minutes. So, I mean, they're responsible. They could, the law doesn't require them to post the meeting minutes, but they're the ones that could go ahead and do it. We try to encourage people to post draft minutes. A lot of places are weeks or months behind in posting minutes. And we've tried to explain to people, look, you don't have to wait for them to be approved. You can post draft minutes. Minutes are rarely changed in any event. And I've gotten in the middle sometimes of a fight where the town clerk says, is it my shot to call or is it the town supervisor's shot to call? And there are some specific responsibilities stated in the law as to what the clerk's responsible for. But you're right, the supervisor drives a lot of it as well. And the town attorney.
He's the chief by law. He is, I know, I did battle with him for many years. He is the chief, or she is the chief financial officer and administrator of the government, especially town government. And, I never realized when I became a board member, 14 years ago, the power that they have. It is tremendous.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about Sunshine Week. So next on our agenda is our next project that we're going to work on is village meeting minutes. So throughout the year, we try to do like a report every 2 months. So we just did school board executive sessions and we try to hit different levels of government. So we're going to do villages next. We have a project coming up where we're going to do zoning planning boards, where we're going to also file a FOIL request for disclosure forms for like city councils across the state. But our next project is village meeting minutes. And villages tend to be smaller. They tend to, we've done reports where smaller governments sometimes do better than the bigger governments, but sometimes a lot of these smaller municipalities seem to have issues. So I thought the most basic task that a government can do is post your meeting minutes. So we're going to do a report where we take a look at 20 villages across the state and just see, are you posting meeting minutes or not? So that should be a lot easier than, looking at hundreds of executive session motions. So I'll be calling on you all, I'll send out an email to help with 2 or 3 villages and check their websites and see what they're doing. So that'll be our plan for our report to issue in April. Any questions on that? If not, our next item on our agenda is guest speakers to hear from the Cornell Law School First Amendment Clinic. We have Mark Jackson and Heather Murray. And I didn't really know about the clinic until I saw an article in Batavia newspaper, and I attached a copy of the article to our agenda, that the Batavia School Board was looking to change their public participation policy. And I've seen this in other places where they want to put a lot of stuff in there that really shouldn't be in there. And the First Amendment Clinic pointed that out to them, that, look, you really can't do some of these things that you're trying to do. And to their credit, I believe the school board listened and took their viewpoints into account. So have you guys tell us a little bit about the clinic, maybe a little bit about this Batavia situation. I don't know how you got involved in that, and I'll turn it over to you guys.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for inviting us. I'm Mark Jackson, the director and founder of the Cornell Law School First Amendment Clinic, and Heather is pictured here as well, and it's her victory, so I'll let her speak about Batavia in a minute. Let me just give you an overview of the clinic first. But let me first just applaud you for the work you're doing. This is really important stuff. What I found throughout my career, I'll tell you briefly about it in a second, is when people aren't looking and paying attention to what's happening in local government, things happen behind closed doors and inappropriately. So the fact that you're shedding a light on this is great, and I applaud you for it. Before I founded the Cornell Clinic, just to tell you, I was the general counsel of Dow Jones, the publisher of the Wall Street Journal. And I left that position when I resigned. The dean of the law school at Cornell asked, I was a graduate there, asked if I would found a clinic because students wanted to do work in this area. So I was very interested in figuring out another way to enhance the First Amendment. And one of them is training young lawyers to do the kind of work that I did my entire career. My local journalism bona fides comes out of two things. One is when I went to Dow Jones, it actually at that point also owned the Ottaway newspapers. So I was doing local journalism there. But also my father was the owner of two local outlets on Long Island, New York. And our claim to fame is his getting thrown out when he refused to leave the city council in Long Beach, Long Island, when it went into executive session. The article was always posted in our den. So he was a hero in our family for that. He was also, by the way, just pertinent to the discussion, a school board member, and many a time my teachers would be picketing in front of our house. So the law school clinic really has two streams of cases. It has what we call our national impact cases, things that we do, purely First Amendment, maybe related to First Amendment and immigration, or First Amendment and the death penalty, or defending someone when Devin Nunes sued for, $250 million against somebody, come to their defense, something on a sort of a national scale. But we've always had as our second stream local journalism. And our first year of existence, we created, I think it's the first clinic in the country, created what's called the Local Journalism Project to focus on issues confronting local media in New York and in adjoining states. And I was lucky enough to get funding for this in order to hire Heather Murray, who's our managing attorney of that effort. And I'll let Heather talk about that, but it's very much this notion of providing free legal service to local media outlets, both in their news gathering capacity, helping them get investigative pieces done, but also defending them when someone's trying to suppress their speech. So we are involved in FOILs and an open meeting request and, the Batavia Board of Education kind of thing. We also have been defending, and Paul and others, you might want to look it up. We've been defending this outlet called the Geneva Believer in Geneva, New York, who's been sued for libel for reporting on what appears to be conflict of interest between a local construction company and their city council. We're in the midst of that right now. The only other thing I wanted to say, because I think it's when I'm listening to you guys and what you're focused on, it's very much part of our thinking, which is what kinds of issues what kind of problems have you found in terms of open government or lack of access, and what successes have you had, and how can you leverage that to have impact throughout the state? We're willing and able to represent individual outlets, but what really excites us is when we can take an issue in one jurisdiction and apply it statewide and figure out where are those big issues. So just in terms of future work with us, to the extent we can identify things which could have a statewide impact, it would really be of use. I'll just end my part by saying that we're very good friends with the Buffalo Clinic. They don't have a local journalism project per se, but they do terrific work, and we plan in the future to be collaborating with them. So with that, let me turn it over to Heather. She can give you, well, she can say whatever she wants, quite frankly. It's an open government discussion, but she will also tell you about Batavia.
Yeah, no, I was very excited to see that you'd come across that article. And I know one of your questions was, how did we get involved with Batavia? We were representing the publisher he's a longtime client of ours in a separate court access case where he was illegally shut out of a family court proceeding that involved an attorney disqualification proceeding that he wanted to cover, where there was an alleged conflict of interest because the prosecuting attorney on the matter was also serving as a part-time judge in a related criminal matter. And we're still representing him in that matter. And in one of our conversations, he mentioned, I have another, what I think is a First Amendment related matter that you might be interested in. And then he said, I've been having issues with several of my school districts where, I found out that they have policies that actually restrict board members from directly speaking to the press, and everything has to go either through the superintendent's office or sometimes it's through the president of the board. I don't know if any of you have had similar issues in your jurisdictions.
Yep.
So someone's laughing.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yes. Which obviously raises concerns when somebody who's either a candidate for the board or running for re-election can't even be interviewed by a reporter, for example. And that was one of the issues that he had. And so we started looking at policies there, and then in the course of doing that, one of the school districts proposed a new public comment policy, which he flagged, our reporter flagged for us because he was concerned about some of the language in the policy, and we were as well. And as you mentioned, Paul, there are a lot of policies throughout the state that are like this, and that's because I think a lot of them just borrow language from each other. So in fact, the superintendent said he looked at Rochester and a few other districts in making his proposals. And so that's why we got involved there. We drafted a letter, which a couple of our great students helped with, pointing out, a couple of key issues with that proposal. And one of them is that they were suggesting that anyone from the public that wanted to discuss personnel or students would not be allowed to do so. They were prohibiting that. We weren't really concerned about, prohibiting discussion of students, but prohibiting discussion of district personnel, which would include, criticizing the superintendent, for example. There's obvious First Amendment concerns with that because, you have a right to criticize public officials. So that was one of our main concerns with it. Another is that they had very vague language in this policy that prohibited obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, and statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice. You know, you can't in advance prohibit libelous statements. You can't even figure out as someone speaking it whether it's libelous or not. That's something that you would really need to go to court about. So you can't prohibit it in advance. So that's something that we had them change as well. So we were pleased with how that came out, and that's something that I don't know if you're seeing similar issues, but that's something we might be able to work with you on going forward.
Did you hear about the situation in Long Island? There's a lawsuit filed in Oyster Bay about a similar policy.
I had not heard about that.
Yeah, there's a guy down in Oyster Bay. He shows up at all their meetings, and and he's very. I think they allow you to speak for 10 minutes, and I think they've lived to regret that now. And you can stop the clock if they start talking. So I've seen videos of him where he stopped the clock now, and this can go on for quite a while. And he's very challenging to them, and they're very frustrated by him. And they tried to adopt a similar new policy, I think in part to shut him down.
Mm-hmm.
And he filed a federal lawsuit, and the case is pending, and the court said, look, you got to go back and fix this. This policy is not good.
I should look that up, or if you have a link, let me know. But did he do it pro se, or did he have the ACLU or someone else assisting?
He has an attorney that's done it for him.
Okay.
And they're trying to settle it now, and I think part of the problem was they were refusing to write a check to him for his damages. They said, we'll pay it to your attorney.
Mm-hmm.
His attorney's like, look, I can't share a legal fee with him. You pay damages to him. He's the damaged party, not me. So it's an interesting, again, they just want to avoid at all costs giving him any credibility or victory. But as far as other journalists, are you familiar with Jim Haney and Investigative Post in Buffalo?
I've heard of him, yes, but we haven't worked with him.
They do a lot of investigative reporting because, as you know, a lot of local media just doesn't have the resources to do it. So Jim Haney contracts with some of these local TV stations, and he has an interesting website, Investigative Post, and he has filed through attorneys some freedom of information lawsuits. Part of his lawsuit actually led to the conviction of on the Buffalo Billion Project. So certain things started coming to light, and about not properly bidding things. But he's an interesting journalist in our area.
Yeah,
that's good to know. It's interesting because, of course, Paul, listening to you and that you report sometimes, your organization's reports, sometimes change the law, as a result of a letter. And that's what Heather found with respect to the Batavia Board of Education, that you don't always have to have a lawsuit
right.
to results. And as you also suggested, Paul, on some matters like perhaps, and I think I agree with you, on the water board, while it's a technical violation, there are probably more serious ones that either involve more money or a greater conflict that might cry out for a lawsuit, where maybe this one, doesn't. And that's the kind of judging, the clinic, right. You can't sue on everyone's behalf. Pick and choose matters.
Yeah, it is hard. You got to really pick and choose your fights. I mean, I didn't want to do a lawsuit, but when this Niagara County lawsuit came across, I said, this is an easy win. I can't see how we possibly lose this.
Yeah.
No, well, one of the best reasons to sue is because you're going to win.
Right.
But also that one, I would agree with you. It cries out. That one cried out for a lawsuit, and there's such an easy mechanism under FOIL to do that.
Right.
Yeah. But I will say on the water board issue, I completely agree with you that they shouldn't be going into are calling a special meeting unless it's a real emergency. It shouldn't be just, we decided today we want to appoint someone on Monday, but we could really appoint this person 3 weeks from now at the actual regular meeting. That's not a reason to go. That's not a reason to hold a special meeting.
Right,
So,
right. The regular meeting was literally another week or two away, but just to try to sneak it in on a Friday.
yeah, they really should not be doing that. So.
Yeah. Any questions of our guest of the clinic, Gary?
Thank you. So what were the penalties on a school board member who spoke out of turn?
Well, I don't think anybody spoke out of turn. They were just revising their policy.
Yes.
No, I mean, who spoke to the press, without authorization?
Oh, well, no one did. That was part of the problem. No one was speaking to him. So, and they didn't have actual penalties, written into the policy, but you could conjecture that somebody could lose their board seat perhaps if they did something like that, but there wasn't anything written into the policy. So,
Gary, one of the things that the local journalism project at the clinic is concerned about is something Paul mentioned before, which is when public officials limit the speaking to the press to some designated person.
yes.
Because, of course, as you can all imagine, the best news comes from people who aren't the designated spokesperson. So, and we're seeing more and more of that take place in all levels of government. And that's an area that we're very much, it's part and parcel of what's happening in Batavia, although they changed their policy, but it's very much something we're looking at and interested in getting at statewide.
I should say, it's great to have Gary with us. Gary actually is the supervisor for the town of West Seneca. So it's always good to have someone who's kind of in the shoes of a government official, and he's a big supporter of open government, which is great to have him participate with us.
That is great.
Yeah, let's face it, a local legislator who is supportive of open government has that much more impact than any of us on the outside.
Right.
That's true.
Maria.
And I just want to add, I think it's just so important to have the journalists involved, because even like yesterday, it was on the news. This was in Kenton Schools in town of Tonawanda, and there was a mother who was allowed to speak for her 3 minutes, and somehow she wangled another 2 minutes. But then they said on the news, the policeman politely was telling her she had to leave, and she was advocating for her daughter to return to non-remote school for more than 2 days. I think she wanted one more day. And the journalist who did the presentation did a good job of, the policeman was gently coming towards her. So if a policeman's coming towards you at a public meeting, I guess that means you're going to get arrested for speaking. So I just think it's so, so important to have that journalistic perspective. And the attorney like yourself, Heather, who understands that that right to access is really being violated. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, the journalists are our best friends, and that's why when they were having a problem with police reports, I said, we got to go to bat for them because they're so helpful in covering our reports. And the only thing that seems to get, unfortunately, attention is embarrassing people in the media with some of these reports. And that seems to get some response other than lawsuits. And so we've certainly worked hand in hand with journalists. And, it's tough to see. I have arguments with people when they say, oh, I'm going to stop my subscription to the paper. I'm like, oh, please, this is the only way we can hold elected officials accountable. We need more people to be subscribers. Papers are going out of business all across the country, and it's just
True.
not a good thing.
So, Paul, in that same vein, Investigative Post took, well, actually 2 very good people from Niagara Gazette. Now,
Right.
Who knows how long the Niagara Gazette's going to last anyway, but at least they ended up at the Investigative Post, and I'm comfortable they're going to be doing some good things there.
Right. A couple of reporters have left to go work there. And, you know, one of the things that I have difficulty with is I would love to subscribe to newspapers across the state. We have $1,300 in our budget. So a lot of newspapers will limit you to 4 or 5 free articles. So I am frequently locked out of viewing things until somebody taught me I can go incognito. I didn't know how to do this. You can go incognito on your computer, which breaks through these firewalls, which prevents you from, but it gives me like another 5 articles, I guess. But so I would love someday to get grant money or something, and part of the grant being to help local newspapers that we can become subscribers to them as well. And I understand, you know, they have to make money, so they don't want people viewing all their stuff for free. But it makes it difficult for me sometimes, because the only way I learn about a lot of these things is I have a Google keyword that every day in my email, it'll send me email any articles that refer to open government or the Coalition for Open Government. And that's how I learn about different things going on across the state. But I don't know what you guys do. Do you guys have subscriptions to papers all across the state, or how do you find out about stuff?
I also have a Google keyword search. I'm not subscribed to all the papers, although I do read quite a few. So
Yeah.
Try to subscribe to some of our clients to keep track of what they're doing. One of our big clients is VT Digger in Vermont. It's an investigative outlet, and I get their alerts every morning, and a couple in the city, but in other areas as well. No, I should tell you, you know, certainly, you know, the clinic can't take on every matter, but we love to hear things. And, you know, sometimes they'll end up in matters. Sometimes it'll just help inform what we're looking at, and we can work together. So do feel free to contact us, especially Heather. I should mention one other thing. We've placed another first for a law clinic. We've actually placed a lawyer in New York metro area to do work in the New York metropolitan area, the same kinds of work that Heather's doing. And that attorney's been, you know, at it now for 6 months or 4 months, and has sort of been, you know, taking on matters in that area as well. So we cover all of New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont so far.
Great. Wow.
yeah, and we'll circle back with you on the police blotter issue, because like I said, there's a letter that we were planning to start drafting soon, and maybe we can just do a joint one with you.
Sure.
So
Anyone else have any questions? If not, we try to keep our meetings to an hour, and it looks like we're almost an hour on the dot from when we started. So we typically meet the second Thursday of the month at 6:30. So our next meeting would be March 11th. And we'll certainly send out a notice to everyone, and you're welcome to join us anytime, Mark or Heather. And add me to your email list. I'll add you to our email list, and we can stay, you know, informed together.
Absolutely.
sounds good.
All right. Well, then I think we'll wrap it up for tonight, and we'll see everybody again next month.
Great.
All righty. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Great meeting. Good
Thank-
night.